Jason tightened his grip on the steering wheel, doing his best to stay calm, even though his heart was pounding like a drum in his chest. He was excited, genuinely excited, for the first time in a long while. After weeks of working late-night shifts with international clients, Jason had finally caught a break. His boss had told him to take the night off, and instead of texting his wife in advance, he decided to surprise her. He imagined her smile when he walked through the door. They would enjoy a quiet evening together, just the two of them. On his way home, he stopped by a boutique florist and picked up a bouquet of her favorite lilies, along with a bottle of Sonoma Valley Red. The drive to their suburban home in Westchester passed in a blur as he rehearsed in his mind how he'd sneak up behind her and kiss her on the neck while she cooked or watched TV. They both worked hard, he in finance, she in real estate, and nights like these were rare. That's what made them special. But when Jason pulled into the driveway, a small pang of unease hit him. Sophie's car wasn't there. Maybe she was running errands or showing a property downtown. He shook off the thought and headed inside, carrying the flowers and wine. The house was still and silent. No music, no lights. Jason set the bouquet down on the kitchen counter and pulled out his phone, dialing Sophie. After a few rings, she finally picked up. Her voice was oddly distant, cold. "Hey," he said cheerfully, "I got off early. Thought I'd surprise you." There was a long pause. "I'm not coming home tonight," she replied flatly. Jason blanked. "What do you mean? You're not staying here?" "I have to work late. Don't worry about it." The sharp tone in her voice hit him like a slap. Sophie had never spoken to him like that before. "Are you okay?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. "Why are you being so—" "Jason, don't start," she cut him off. "I'm tired. We'll talk tomorrow." The line went dead. Jason stood there in stunned silence, phone still in hand, the bouquet on the counter suddenly seeming absurd. The silence in the house now felt suffocating. The next morning, Jason sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. He hadn't slept. All night he replayed Sophie's strange tone, her short answers, the way she hung up. Something wasn't right. And then he saw it. Through the window, her car pulled into the driveway. Jason stood up slowly. Sophie stepped out of the vehicle looking composed, as if nothing unusual had happened. She closed the door gently, smoothed her blazer, and walked toward the house. She opened the door like it was just another Thursday morning. "Morning," she said casually as she passed through the entryway. "I'm going to take a quick shower." She didn't ask where the flowers came from, didn't ask why he was home. She didn't ask anything at all. Jason watched her walk down the hall, completely stunned. No apology, no explanation. Her indifference hit harder than any excuse. A quiet fury stirred in him. He grabbed her car keys and stepped outside. Sitting behind the wheel of her Lexus, he powered on the dashboard tablet. His fingers navigated instinctively to the GPS history. There it was, the address where she'd spent the night. Not a client's house, not a hotel, a residential address on the other side of town. He stared at the screen, then opened the glove box, almost without thinking. There, amid some gum wrappers and old receipts, was a half-used box of condoms. They hadn't used protection in years. Jason sat motionless for a few seconds, staring at the open box like it might dissolve if he blinked. His heart pounded in his chest, not with sadness, but with rage. When Sophie returned from the shower, wrapped in her silk robe and toweling off her hair, she found Jason waiting at the kitchen table. Her smile faded when their eyes met. "You're not going to ask where I was?" she said, forcing a casual tone. Jason said nothing. He simply placed the box of condoms on the table between them. Sophie's expression hardened. "You went through my car?" Jason's voice was ice. "I had to, since my wife was acting like a stranger." She scoffed. "You're overreacting." "Really?" he said, eyes locked on hers. "Because I also checked the GPS. Want to tell me who lives at that address?" Her jaw tightened. Then came the silence, dense and suffocating. "You're acting insane, Jason," she snapped. "It's not what you think." "So you didn't spend the night with another man?" he asked, his voice rising. "You were just, what, playing board games? Sharing career tips?" Sophie stood up. "It wasn't cheating." Jason laughed bitterly. "You slept with someone else? You used protection? And it wasn't cheating?" She hesitated, then said the words he would never forget. "It was gratitude." He blinked. "What?" "It was a one-time thing," she said quickly, avoiding his eyes. "His name is Eric. I made a mistake at work that almost cost me my job. He pulled some strings with corporate to keep me safe." Jason stared at her in disbelief. "He wanted something in return," she continued. "He didn't ask for money. He just made it clear what he expected. I had to do it. I did it for us." "You had sex with him for job security?" Jason said flatly. Sophie nodded, then added, "There was no feeling, no pleasure. It meant nothing." Jason couldn't speak. His hands shook. He looked at the flowers still sitting on the counter, now wilted, and the unopened wine bottle next to them. The night he imagined, the quiet, warm night with his wife, was a fantasy, and this was the reality. Betrayal, lies, and a hollow justification. And then Sophie, somehow reading the tension, tried to change the moment. She opened the wine, poured 2 glasses, and slid one across the table. "I love you, Jason," she said softly. "Let's just forget this, please." Jason stared at the glass. "Forget?" Jason didn't touch the wine. He sat there, eyes fixed on Sophie's face, searching for even a flicker of real remorse. All he saw was cold calculation, dressed up as tenderness. "You're saying he didn't force you?" he asked. Sophie shook her head slowly. "No, it was my choice." That was it, the final nail. Jason stood up, drained and hollow, every muscle tight with quiet rage. He stepped outside, letting the crisp November air slap him awake. His thoughts raced in chaotic circles, but one thing became clear. He couldn't let this slide. Jason had always considered himself a man of integrity, a man who didn't yell, didn't throw things, didn't explode. But this betrayal dressed up as strategy, this manipulation disguised as sacrifice, was too much. He could have filed for divorce, walked away, but that felt too clean, too easy. Sophie needed to understand the weight of what she had done. Not just her, but her smug, power-drunk boss, Eric, too. They would both pay. That afternoon, Jason returned to the house and acted as if nothing had happened. He put on his most convincing face, calm, composed, understanding. "You know what?" he said to her that night over reheated pasta. "Let's just move on. It's not worth destroying what we've built." Sophie's relief was instant. She smiled like she'd won. "Thank you. I knew you'd understand. You've always been the reasonable one." Jason nodded and took a sip of wine, forcing a small smile. Inside, he was already laying out every detail of the plan. The next morning, Jason made a quiet request at work, a transfer. Not permanent, just a temporary change of pace, a 2-week on-site assignment at one of their satellite branches in Portland. His boss, though surprised, agreed. "Burned out?" the man asked with a raised brow. "Just need a little space," Jason replied with a smile. Sophie didn't blink when he told her about the trip. "Do what you have to do," she said flatly, already back on her laptop. She had no idea this was the first step. While she was busy pretending to be fine, Jason was meeting with a local theater group downtown, a small collective of actors who specialized in immersive public performance and street improv. He made them an unusual offer. "I need a few people to act like they recognize someone. Just a few lines. Polite, ambiguous, unsettling." The actors were intrigued. Jason handed them a name, a photo, and a story. Over the next few days, he coordinated everything: times, places, trigger phrases. Just enough to create paranoia, but not enough to be traced. He didn't want revenge through anger.
He wanted psychological erosion, the slow unraveling of the false sense of security Sophie clung to. Then, before leaving town, he double-checked the final details and disappeared to Portland. Sophie had settled back into routine. Jason was out of town, and she went about her week as if nothing had happened. Morning coffee runs, afternoon showings, smiling to clients like she wasn't carrying a secret the size of a freight truck. On Tuesday morning, she stepped into her favorite local cafe, the one near her office where they knew her name and usual order. The warm smell of cinnamon and espresso wrapped around her like a blanket. She was reaching for her cup when a man in a navy suit, standing near the pickup counter, gave her a strange look. He squinted slightly, then smiled, as if remembering something. "Oh, wow," he said with amused surprise. "It's you." Sophie blinked. "I'm sorry?" He chuckled, leaning in slightly. "You're the one who thanks her colleagues in very special ways, right? I've heard about your professional gratitude." Her face flushed instantly. "Excuse me?" But the man just smirked, shrugged, and walked out, leaving her standing there, coffee in hand, heart racing. What the hell was that? She told herself it was a mistake, some weirdo. Maybe he confused her with someone else. But it didn't stop there. The next morning, different cafe, different barista. Sophie stood in line, still shaken from yesterday's weirdness. Then she heard it again. A young man in a sharp suit behind her gave her a knowing grin. "I just want to say, the way you support your coworkers, really admirable. Not many people would do what you did." She spun around, eyes wide. "What are you talking about?" He just winked and said, "Hey, no shame. It's a rough job market." She didn't finish her order. She left, heart pounding, looking over her shoulder twice. By Thursday, the anxiety had bloomed into full-on dread. Sophie skipped the coffee run altogether, staying in her office, checking her phone obsessively. Jason wasn't texting much. He'd only replied to a couple of messages with one-word answers. Busy. Call later. She even started to wonder, had he told someone? Was this his revenge? By Friday, it was undeniable. She walked into her office building and passed a delivery guy in the lobby who whistled softly and muttered, "Boss must be real thankful." She froze. They knew. Someone was spreading it. And for the first time, Sophie didn't think she was imagining things. Her coworkers were giving her sidelong glances. The receptionist avoided eye contact. A few people stifled laughter when she walked by. By the end of the week, Sophie's nerves were shot. She hadn't slept properly in days. Every time her phone buzzed, her stomach twisted into knots. The anonymous comments, the strange smiles, the murmurs behind her back, they weren't stopping. She tried to stay composed. She even booked a session with a therapist next Tuesday, but Friday came first. The morning passed uneventfully. For the first time all week, she started to believe it was over. Maybe the weirdness had peaked. Maybe Jason wasn't behind it all. Then, just before lunch, it happened. A courier stepped into the office, young guy, grinning, carrying a massive bouquet of blood-red roses. The fragrance filled the space, impossible to ignore. "Delivery for Sophie Martin," he announced, loud and clear. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Sophie froze in her chair. The courier walked straight up to her, placed the bouquet on her desk, and handed her a card. People were already whispering. She opened the envelope with trembling hands. The message inside was printed in bold script. "To the most generous and sexy woman I know, Eric." Laughter, gasps, someone actually whistled. Sophie stood up so fast her chair toppled over. "This isn't mine," she barked. "It's a prank, a sick joke." The courier blinked. "Ma'am, it's got your name on it." "Get it out of here," she screamed, her voice cracking. That's when Mr. Kennedy, the company's regional director, serious, disciplined, and rarely seen smiling, stepped into the room. "What's going on here?" he asked, sharply. Sophie was shaking. "Someone's harassing me." He raised an eyebrow, picked up the card, read it, and exhaled slowly. Then, dryly, "Well, this is inappropriate." More laughter echoed in the room. "Maybe," he continued, "you and Eric would like to explain this. Or better yet, let's run it by HR, or a polygraph maybe." He smiled faintly. A joke, maybe, but the damage was done. Sophie snapped. "You know what? To hell with all of you," she shouted, voice rising into hysteria. "Yes, I slept with Eric. It was incredible, and none of you cowards would ever understand what it takes to actually get somewhere in this company." Silence. No one laughed now. Her face was flushed, eyes wide, breathing ragged. A few people looked away in shock. Mr. Kennedy slowly sat down on the edge of a nearby desk, face pale, unsure if he should say anything else. And then, as if perfectly timed, Eric walked in through the glass doors. His smile vanished when he saw Sophie. She marched up to him, grabbed his hand, and raised it in front of everyone. "Tell them, Eric! Tell them we're lovers! Say it!" He stared at her like she'd just grown horns. "Why would you, Sophie, what the hell are you doing?" he whispered. Someone muttered, "So it's true?" Eric looked around the office, dozens of faces watching. He pulled his hand away like it was burning. I didn't." He was stumbling. "Coward," Sophie hissed. And with that, she grabbed her bag and stormed out of the office, slamming the glass door behind her.
Jason returned from Portland 2 days later. The moment he walked through the front door, Sophie was waiting, disheveled, angry, and shaking with adrenaline. "What the hell did you do?" she snapped, marching up to him. "People know, Jason. Strangers talk to me like they know everything. The flowers, the notes, the looks. You set me up." Jason calmly dropped his bag by the door, took off his coat, and turned to her with a serene expression. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he said, voice calm and low. "Maybe you're just feeling guilty." She lost it. "You smug bastard," she screamed, running to the kitchen and grabbing a knife from the counter. "You ruined my life!" Jason's face didn't change. With a smooth, practiced motion, he stepped forward and disarmed her, slapping the knife from her hand. It clattered to the floor. She gasped, more shocked by his cold, steady demeanor than the move itself. In a wild burst of rage, she picked up a bar stool and hurled it at the sliding glass door. The window shattered into a spray of glass. Jason didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly pulled out his phone and dialed 911. When the police arrived, Jason met them at the door with the demeanor of a man who had seen this coming. Sophie, emotionally wrecked and slumped on the living room floor, was sobbing uncontrollably. "She's not well," Jason told the officers. "She's been under extreme stress, and she's been drinking." They nodded, already assessing the scene. "I think she needs medical help more than anything," he added quietly. "This might be a nervous breakdown." Sophie was taken to the hospital that night for observation. She spent nearly a week under psychiatric care. When she finally came home, a little more stable, the house felt wrong, off, too quiet. And then she realized why. Jason's belongings were gone. The drawers, the closet, his toothbrush vanished. Panic gripped her as she dialed his number. He picked up after a few rings. "Jason," she demanded, "what is going on? Your things, did you just leave without even telling me?" His voice was cool, precise. "Sophie, I can't live with someone who broke down because of her own betrayal." She tried to speak, but he cut her off. "I've already filed for divorce," he continued. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Her throat went dry. "You can't just leave and take everything." "I didn't," he said, "but the house is for sale, And I think splitting the proceeds 80-20 is more than fair." 80%? Are you out of your mind? Jason's tone shifted. Still quiet, but now sharp as ice. "Remember the knife you grabbed? The security cameras in the house? You forgot about those, didn't you?" Silence. "I have everything I need to prove you threatened me. You want to fight in court? Go ahead. Or you can accept the terms." Sophie opened her mouth, but no words came. He had her. She knew it. The divorce proceeded quietly. Sophie tried to fight at first, threatened, begged, guilt-tripped, but Jason didn't budge. The evidence was clear, the lawyers efficient, and the judge unamused. She walked away with 20% of the house sale. It wasn't just the money that stung, it was the fall from grace. By the time the legal dust settled, both she and Eric had been terminated from their company. HR launched a formal investigation after the public meltdown, and while neither Jason nor anyone else officially reported them, the whispers had become a storm. The firm, proud of its polished image and clean record, had no intention of weathering that kind of scandal. They were let go quietly. No recommendations, no goodbyes. Their reputations were ruined. Sophie tried to rebuild, to find freelance clients, to explain away the gaps in her resume. But in a world built on trust, whispers carried weight. Every new door seemed to slam before it opened. Eric fared no better. Last Jason heard, he'd moved out of state, changed his name on LinkedIn, started over from zero. Jason? He didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. After the settlement, he didn't speak to Sophie again. He moved into a small condo near the lake, threw himself into work, took longer walks, drank his coffee alone. The actors he'd hired? Paid in full, discreet, efficient, gone. He had won. Every piece of his plan had landed, every step calculated, executed with precision. And yet, when he stood by the window at night, staring out into the cold silence, he sometimes remembered how Sophie used to fall asleep curled into him, how she once laughed with her whole body, how they dreamed together once about a house, a family, something permanent. Now, all that remained was silence.